It was a grueling week of testimony in the murder case against the singer known as David. New evidence, graphic photos, and forensics have all been shown by prosecutors to try and convince the judge that there is enough evidence to bring this case to a jury trial. Today will be the fifth day of this preliminary hearing. NBC4's Brittany Hope has been at the courthouse covering it every day. Brittany, do we have any idea what's going to happen today?
Hi, Lynette. We do expect the LAPD detective who first started his testimony on Friday to continue his time on the stand today. And then it seems like this very lengthy preliminary hearing could wrap up. Now, I do want to warn you that a lot of the details I'm going to tell you about what we learned inside court on Friday may be difficult to hear. So that LAPD detective did take the stand and talked about what was found on David's phone. He described text messages between the singer and Celeste. Many were explicit. Others dealt with abortion, marriage plans, and Celeste running away from home, and ultimately the end of what David allegedly saw as a romantic relationship. The detective also described sexually explicit images found on David's phone that show him with Celeste when he was 18 and 19 years old and she was 13. Evidence prosecutors believe proved the singer was abusing Celeste. The medical examiner also testified and showed photos of the autopsy on the young teen girl, photos described by NBC4 Investigates Eric Leonard, who's been inside these hearings and has seen the photos firsthand, as nightmarish. The medical examiner explained Celeste was the victim of a homicide, likely caused by sharp force injuries to her chest and abdomen. The hearing continues this morning at 9:15, and NBC4 Investigates Eric Leonard will be inside that courtroom again, gathering new details. So make sure to look for his report starting at 3 o'clock. We're live in downtown. Brittany Hope for Today in LA.
There is a photograph taken of every child in America once a year, in a school gymnasium, against a mottled blue background, by a man with a tripod who tells them all to say the same word. It comes home in a paper envelope with a price list on the front and a sheet of stickers if the parents want to spend the extra $4. It is the most ordinary object in a child's life. On a Saturday evening in February 2024, a 20-year-old man in West Hollywood used one of those photographs to convince two sheriff's deputies that he barely knew the girl in it. They had come to his door because 60 miles inland, a mother had reported her daughter missing, and detectives working that report had pulled the girl's phone records, and this man's number was sitting in them. He was calm about it. He told them he had met her once, months back, in passing. And to show them how little there was to it, he took out his phone, found her picture, and held the screen up so they could see her face. 7th grade, 13 years old. The blue background, the paper envelope, all of it. The deputies wrote down what he said, because that is what you do, thanked him, and went back to the car. 2 days later, the girl came home on her own. Someone typed, "No one from any agency stood on that porch again." What the deputies did not know, and what prosecutors would not allege for another 2 years, was that the abuse had started 3 months earlier. It was still ongoing on that night. It was ongoing while he was holding up her school picture as proof of his innocence. She had 14 months left, and when she was finally found, it was not by a detective, a search team, or anyone who had ever read her file. It was by a man at work on an ordinary afternoon who noticed something amiss with a parked car. The charges here include the sexual abuse of a child and what was done to her body afterward. We are not going to describe either. She was 14. If tonight is not the night for this, stop the video. That is a reasonable thing to do. This is the Crime Executioner, where we work from the filings instead of the rumors. Subscribe and turn on notifications if that is what you came for. Her name was Celeste Rivas Hernandez. This is the story of everyone who had her and let go. Lake Elsinore sits about 70 miles southeast of Los Angeles, in the part of Riverside County people call the Inland Empire. It is built around the largest natural lake in Southern California, and for 2 generations it has served the same kind of family. You come here because you cannot afford Orange County. You take the commute because the house is bigger, the street is quieter, and your kids can walk to places on their own. That is the town where Celeste Abigail Rivas Hernandez grew up. She was born on the 7th of September 2010 to parents who had come to California from El Salvador. She was the youngest of 3. She had 2 older siblings, including a brother named Matthew Rivas, who would later be one of the few people willing to say out loud what the family did and did not know. She went to Lakeland Village School, on the western side of the lake. If you want to know who she was to the people around her, you do not need a psychologist. You need the man behind the counter at the corner shop. She came in most days after school, usually with friends, wearing a backpack, her hair long, curly, and loose. She bought candy, soda, and Takis. She did this often enough, and for long enough, that shopkeepers and neighbors recognized her on sight and could describe her later without being asked twice. That detail matters more than it seems. In a case that would eventually involve federal-scale evidence and a courtroom in downtown Los Angeles, the earliest and most reliable witnesses to Celeste's ordinary life were the people who sold her snacks. She was 13 years old in the winter of 2024. 7th grade. And somewhere in that same stretch of her life, according to prosecutors, she had already met the person who would be charged, years later, with ending it. She left on Valentine's Day. The household cameras caught it. Sometime around 2 in the morning on the 14th of February, 2024, Celeste walked out of her own front door while the house was asleep. There was no forced entry, no struggle, nothing that would make a patrol officer's pulse move. A 13-year-old girl let herself out into the dark and did not come back. She left a letter behind for her family. What it said has never been made public. The family waited most of a day before calling anyone. That is not negligence, it is arithmetic. Every parent of a teenager runs the same calculation, and most of the time it is correct, and the kid walks back in, embarrassed by dinner. She did not walk back in. At 18 minutes past 9 on the morning of the 15th, the family called the Riverside County Sheriff's Department and reported her missing. That timestamp is in the records. So is the next one. At 41 minutes past 7 that same evening, deputies were back at the house for a follow-up report. 2 law enforcement contacts in a single day, both documented, both inside the first 24 hours. Whatever else this case would eventually become, it did not begin with indifference. The family did their own work alongside it. They went looking for cameras. A friend of the family, a man identified in reporting as Alonzo, had footage from the neighborhood that might have shown which direction she went. He retrieved it and passed it along. He never heard back about it. Not from the family, not from anyone. That is a small thing that turns out not to be small. Surveillance from the right night, from the right block, is the kind of material that can define a search. It existed, it changed hands, and then it disappeared into the gap between a worried neighbor and an open file, and nobody in the public record has ever said what became of it. Then came the post. Someone in Celeste's family went onto Facebook and wrote, in Spanish, that Celeste had last been seen on the 14th of February, that she had now been missing for 24 hours, and that the writer was distraught. And then 2 words that every parent in this situation eventually types. Please share. That post did something the report could not. It moved. It went out through a Salvadoran community in an Inland Empire town and into feeds and group chats and phones, and it put her face in front of people who would actually recognize it. Meanwhile, 60 miles away, detectives working the report she had generated were doing the ordinary, unglamorous thing. They were pulling her phone records. One number in those records was about to matter more than anything else in this case. Phone records do not lie about who you talk to. They cannot be charmed, and they do not forget. Investigators pull them because the pattern inside them is a map of a person's real life, as opposed to the one they present. Celeste's records had a number in them that did not belong to a classmate. It came back to a young man in Los Angeles County. His name was David Anthony Burke. He was 20 years old. Outside the small world of Lake Elsinore, he was becoming genuinely famous, recording under the stage name D4vd, spelled with a 4 and a V, and pronounced simply David. He had come up from bedroom recordings and streaming playlists to real money and a real career, the kind of trajectory where the next 18 months decide everything. On the 17th of February, 2 days after the report was filed, a Riverside County deputy called that number. Burke picked up. According to prosecutors, he told the deputy he had last spoken to Celeste on the 13th or 14th of February. He said he did not know she was a minor. He said he did not know she had been reported missing. Riverside did not stop there. They asked the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department to conduct a welfare check at Burke's West Hollywood residence. That evening, deputies drove out and knocked. He answered. He talked to them. And prosecutors say he told this version he had met Celeste in person exactly one time, in November of 2023. Then he showed them the photograph. He brought up her picture on his phone and turned the screen so the deputies could see it. A school portrait. In his framing, proof that this was nothing. A face he barely knew. The deputies documented the contact and left. Here is the line that has to be said carefully. because it is the entire case. Prosecutors would later allege that Burke and Celeste had begun a sexual relationship in November of 2023, when she was 13 and he was 18. November of 2023, the same month he volunteered to 2 sheriff's deputies as the one time he had ever met her. He has pleaded not guilty. That allegation has never been tested in front of a jury, and everything in it remains the state's theory rather than a proven fact. But it is the state's theory, filed in court, on the record. Which means the doorstep in West Hollywood was not the moment law enforcement failed to find Celeste Rivas Hernandez. It was the moment law enforcement found the person they would eventually charge, told him exactly what they knew, and drove away. If you want true crime built from filings and records, not comment section theories, subscribe and turn on notifications. Everything ahead of us comes from court documents, sheriff's records, and sworn testimony, and we will tell you when something is only alleged. She came home 2 days later. And what happened next is the part almost nobody covers. On the 19th of February, Celeste came home. Her parents did the only thing available to a family in that position. They took her phone. No device, no contact, no way for anyone on the outside to reach her without going through the front door of the house. It worked for a matter of days. Prosecutors allege that Burke bought a replacement phone, then paid one of Celeste's classmates $1,000 to hand it to her. A middle schooler in Lake Elsinore carrying $1,000 and a device, acting as a courier between an adult and a child. Think about what that figure tells you. $1,000 is not a gesture. It is the price of certainty. It is what you pay when you cannot afford the line to go dead, and when you have decided that a parent's decision about their own daughter is an obstacle to be circumvented rather than respected. The parents never knew. They had done the right thing, and it had already been undone. She left again on the 19th of March. Her family filed a second missing persons report with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. And then on the 5th of April 2024, she left for the last time. Third report. Same agency, same family. Her brother, Matthew Rivas, would later describe that day. He said that when she disappeared, she was on her way to see a movie. She was going with Burke. Now, the thing that happens to a file like this. When a child is reported missing, the response depends almost entirely on the category the case is entered under. An abduction triggers escalation, alerts, and urgency measured in hours. A runaway results in a report and a wait, because the underlying assumption is that the child left by choice and will return by choice, and most of the time that assumption is correct. The problem is the second report. And the third. By the third, the vocabulary shifts. Chronic. Habitual. The child ceases to be an emergency and becomes a pattern. And each time she comes home safe, it quietly confirms to the system that the alarm was overblown, except that the research points the other way. Repeated running is one of the strongest known indicators that a child is being exploited by an adult, because a child who has already left home is one whose absence has a ready explanation. So the classification that should have raised the temperature on Celeste's file is the one that lowered it. 3 reports, 3 chances, and after the 5th of April 2024, she never generated a fourth. Here is where most people's understanding of this case is wrong. The assumption is that Celeste Rivas Hernandez disappeared in April of 2024 and was killed shortly after. That a girl vanished, and the worst happened, and the only mystery was where. That is not what occurred. She was alive for more than a year after that final report, and she was not invisible during it. Investigators later established, through surveillance footage and digital evidence, that she was alive in September of 2024. They established it again in January of 2025. Understand what that means in practical terms. 5 months after her last missing persons report, she was in a physical location at a specific time in front of a camera. 9 months after that, she generated another trace. She was moving through Southern California, one of the most heavily recorded regions in the country, leaving behind exactly the kind of material that closes cases. She was not lost. She was findable. The picture on the ground is murkier than a clean disappearance, too. Neighbors in Lake Elsinore said they saw her around later in the year, with her parents. The public record does not establish exactly when she came back after April, or how long she stayed, or how many times she came and went. What it establishes is that she was not simply gone from the world the way a missing child usually is. Prosecutors say the relationship with Burke ended in November 2024. They also say the contact did not end, it continued, and so did the conduct they have charged him with. By the spring of 2025, her life had a shape to it that almost nobody around her could see in full. Not her school, not her neighbors, not the agency that still had her name in a file. Prosecutors allege that on or about the 23rd of April 2025, that year ran out. She was 14 years old, and it would be 4.5 more months before anyone knew. There is a black Tesla parked on Bluebird Avenue in the Hollywood Hills. Nobody is looking for it. Nobody has reported it. It is simply sitting on a residential street in an expensive neighborhood, the way 10,000 cars sit on 10,000 streets in Los Angeles on any given afternoon. Eventually, the neighbors get tired of it. On the 27th of August, 2025, a parking enforcement officer comes by and chalks the tires. This is the most routine act in municipal government. You mark the rubber, you come back later, and if the mark has not moved, the car has not moved. The mark does not move. On the 3rd of September, the vehicle is ticketed for violating the 72-hour parking ordinance. 2 days after that, on the 5th, it is towed. It goes to an impound lot on the 1000 block of Mansfield Avenue in Hollywood, where it is logged and parked and left. Like every other vehicle, nobody comes to collect. Follow the chain so far. A parking officer touched this car twice. A tow operator hooked it and moved it. A lot attendant assigned it a space. 4 separate points of contact with city systems, none of them investigative, none of them aware of anything. 3 days pass. On the 8th of September 2025, someone working at that lot notices an odor coming from the vehicle and calls the Los Angeles Police Department. Officers respond. They obtain a search warrant. They open the front trunk. And a missing persons case that had been sitting in a Riverside County file for 17 months ends, 60 miles from where it started, because a man doing his job on an impound lot picked up a phone. The remains were identified through dental records as Celeste Abigail Rivas Hernandez. She had been reported missing on the 5th of April 2024. She was found on the 8th of September 2025. Her body was found 1 day after what would have been her 15th birthday. The car was registered to David Anthony Burke. What happened next is the part almost nobody covers, and it is the reason this case spent months at the center of a public fight about transparency. In the immediate aftermath, the Los Angeles Police Department said very little, and what it did say was carefully hedged. Robbery homicide captain Scott Williams told reporters that no suspect had been identified and that the cause of death remained undetermined. He said there was uncertainty about whether any crime beyond concealing a body had occurred. To a public watching a 14-year-old girl come out of a famous musician's car, that landed badly. Then the department went further. On the 21st of November 2025, the LAPD obtained a court order placing a security hold on the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's entire case file. Judge Craig Richmond granted it. That order sealed the findings, including the cause and manner of death. The medical examiner's office objected in public, which almost never happens. Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Ode Ukpo said that security holds of this kind are rare and that there is no evidence they improve investigative outcomes. He also disclosed something pointed. The night sky is a canvas painted with stars. The LAPD had already requested a hold once before, on the 15th of September, and that request had been denied for insufficient justification. His office said it remained committed to transparency and was legally bound to comply anyway. The department's case for secrecy came from Detective Joshua Byers of robbery homicide. In a court declaration, Byers argued that releasing the autopsy details could expose investigative strategy, identify witnesses, or reveal informants, and could put people in danger. 3 days after the order, the LAPD changed its language for the first time. Deputy Chief Alan Hamilton described the case publicly as an investigation into murder. He said accountability was coming. He said no one was off the table, and named Burke when he said it. The department also used that moment to kill 2 rumors that had taken over social media, stating plainly that Celeste's body had been neither frozen nor decapitated. So by the end of November 2025, the public knew this much. There was a homicide investigation, there was a named person of interest, and there was a court order ensuring that almost nothing else would come out. We work from filings, declarations, and sworn testimony, and we tell you when something is contested. If that is the version of this case you want, subscribe and turn on notifications now, because what the grand jury did next is where this stops being a mystery. Chapter 8. Building the Case. While the autopsy sat under seal, prosecutors were doing something the public could not see. In November of 2025, a grand jury was convened in Los Angeles to hear evidence in the death of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Grand jury proceedings are secret by design. Witnesses go in, testify, and come out. Nobody reports what was said. What leaks, when anything leaks, is the shape of the thing rather than the substance. The shape here was people close to Burke being compelled to talk. Executives at his record label were questioned. Robert Morgenroth, general manager of the management company Mogul Vision, testified about the singer's movements. Then there was Neo Langston, 23 years old, a live streamer, and a friend of Burke's. He was called as a witness and did not appear. In January of 2026, he was arrested on that failure. He testified the following month. Burke's own family was pulled in as well. His parents and his brother were subpoenaed in January. In February, they went to court to fight the subpoenas, arguing their due process rights were being violated. They lost. Then the seal cracked, by accident. In February of 2026, sealed court documents became public through a related legal fight in a Texas appellate court. Nobody released them deliberately. They simply surfaced. And inside them, Burke was identified as the central target of the grand jury's murder investigation. Being a target is not being charged. It means prosecutors have developed substantial evidence pointing at a specific person and are building toward a decision. But it removed any remaining doubt about where this was headed. And then, once again, the case moved because of somebody who had never heard of it. On the 17th of January 2026, a Caltrans worker was at a remote site off State Route 154 in Santa Barbara County, roughly 100 miles north of Los Angeles. He found an identification document on the ground. It was Celeste's United States passport card. That is the second time in this story that the decisive object was found by a person at work, doing something entirely unrelated, who simply noticed that something did not belong. Chapter 9. The Charges. On the 16th of April 2026, lap detectives arrested David Anthony Burke at a house on Marmont Avenue in Los Angeles, 7 months after the discovery. 2 years and 2 months after 2 deputies stood on his doorstep in West Hollywood. 4 days later, the district attorney's office filed. The charges: first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under the age of 14, unlawful mutilation of human remains. Attached to the murder count were 3 special circumstances and 1 special allegation: lying in wait, murder for financial gain, alleging the killing was done to protect his career, the use of a deadly weapon, and the third one, which is the reason this entire story matters: murder of a witness. Prosecutors allege that Celeste Rivas Hernandez was killed because she was involved in an investigation into lewd and lascivious acts committed against her by Burke. Not killed in anger. Not killed by accident. Killed, according to the state, because of what she could tell somebody. Special circumstances are not decoration. In California, they are what turns a murder charge into a capital case. Burke appeared in court the same day and pleaded not guilty to all charges. Judge Teresa McGonigal handled the arraignment and the question of bail. He was ordered held. Leading the prosecution is Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman of the Major Crimes Division, one of the most experienced homicide prosecutors in the county. Silverman has said the case involves roughly 40 terabytes of evidence. For the defense, Burke retained Blair Burke, a Los Angeles criminal defense attorney with a long history of representing high-profile clients. Chapter 10. 5 days. The preliminary hearing began on the 20th of July 2026 in front of Judge Charlene F. Olmedo. It ran 5 days. A preliminary hearing is not a trial, and it is not a rehearsal for one. The prosecution puts on enough evidence to show probable cause. The defense does not have to present a case at all. The judge decides one question: is there enough here for a jury to hear it? The testimony that came out told the public more about the state's case than anything since the arrest. Prosecutors introduced text messages between Burke and Celeste that they say established the sexual relationship, dating to when she was 13. Detective Joshua Byers testified about the physical and digital evidence collected during the investigation. Then came the money. Burke's financial manager took the stand. So did an employee from the finance department at Interscope, his record label. Together they testified that between 2023 and 2025, Burke generated approximately $11 million through merchandise and publishing advances, and that he was positioned to make substantially more. That testimony exists for a reason. It is the evidentiary foundation of the financial gain special circumstance. The state is arguing that $11 million, and everything it was about to become, is the motive. The defense used its time differently. It presented text messages and travel documents which it argued show that Celeste's family knew she and Burke were spending time together. That is the defense's claim, not an established fact, and it has not been tested. But it signals the strategy, which is to complicate the picture of who knew what. Asked about it afterward by reporters, District Attorney Nathan Hochman declined to engage with the question. Prosecutors also used the hearing to settle something that had been circulating online for the better part of a year. They confirmed, on the record, that Celeste was not pregnant at the time she was killed. On the 27th of July, Judge Olmedo ruled probable cause on all 3 charges. She held Burke to answer on the special circumstances and ordered him held without bail. Chapter 11. What happens next? Burke is due back in court on the 31st of August, 2026, for arraignment on the information. Judge Olmedo ruled that trial must begin within 90 days, which puts a verdict potentially inside this calendar year. Speaking after the hearing, Hochman confirmed that Burke is eligible for the death penalty and that his office is currently weighing whether to seek it. It is worth being precise about what the July ruling did and did not establish, because a great deal of what circulates online gets this wrong. Probable cause is a threshold designed to be low. It asks whether a reasonable person could believe a crime occurred and this person committed it. It is the same standard that supports an arrest. Conviction requires something else entirely. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt, unanimously, from 12 jurors who have heard both sides. Between those 2 standards sits everything that has not happened yet. Cross-examination. Defense witnesses. Expert challenge. A jury that has not been selected. David Anthony Burke has pleaded not guilty. He is presumed innocent. That is not a phrase we attach for legal cover. It is his actual status under the law, and it remains his status until a jury says otherwise. Closing count what the record shows. 3 missing persons reports filed by a family with the same agency in 8 weeks. 2 separate law enforcement agencies making contact with the same adult in the same day about the same child. 1 welfare check at his front door. And after all of it, the 2 moments that actually moved this case came from men who had never heard her name. A worker on an impound lot who noticed something wrong with a car. A Caltrans worker on a roadside 100 miles north who noticed a card on the ground. Neither of them was looking for Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Both of them found her anyway. That is not a story about a girl who vanished. It is a story about a girl who was in the system the entire time. We will be in court coverage for the arraignment on the 31st of August, and through the trial that follows, working from the filings the way we have here. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you get it when it lands, not 3 weeks late from somebody guessing. She was born on the 7th of September 2010. She liked candy and soda and Takis, and the man at the corner store knew her face. Her name was Celeste Abigail Rivas Hernandez. She was 14 years old.